I'd like to welcome Kylie Riddell here with me today to join me in our series In the Saddle with Linda. And Kylie is a very accomplished dressage rider, but also a very dedicated horse owner. And so thank you for joining me today, Kylie. And I'm looking forward to hearing you share your journey as a horse owner with not only Poseidon products, but also the management and the diet and all the other things that we've discussed along the way. So welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's going to be a long conversation. We're going to have to shorten it constantly.
Kylie and I have had many chats, haven't we? And we love to talk because I think the reality is gut health is such an exciting topic and it's quite transformational. And it's the reason why I love doing these interviews, because I get to learn so much about the journey people have had and the tips they've learned along the way and what impact it's had on their horses, and then hopefully inspire other horse owners to make a change, particularly with those horses that we have ongoing challenges with. So thank you. And I know, Kylie, you've got a few stories to share with us today.
I seem to have a lot of challenged horses.
Well, let's start there. Let's go back, because I'm thinking we've probably been working together for about, gosh, how long would it be now?
I think I'm trying to think of COVID lockdown. I think it's just, is it 12 months? Is it 10 months?
It'd be close to it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's getting up there because time goes quick. We're in February already. Exactly. But it started early last year anyway.
So let's go back there. Why did you first contact us?
Desperation, maybe.
Yep.
In a vicious circle. Couldn't figure out where I was going wrong and where I was going right. Mm-hmm. So with this particular horse and why I started this journey, I don't know, I just went, I've got to start with a diet. Mm-hmm. Not knowing enough about nutrition, and that's not really my area. Of course, I've always tried to have my horses have good food and no energy input to output and things like that. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, there's something missing. I always knew with this horse something was missing, but didn't know where to start. And that's when I gave you guys a call and I sort of started and said, basically, I think I just asked a question, what is your product?
Yeah,
like, exactly. Do I need it? Exactly. And the good thing about that conversation was the first conversation actually had nothing to do with the product. It actually had to do with the diet. And it took us 2 weeks of just working on diets and things like that, how just a natural diet would help the horse, and then what we can do after that. So it was sort of like a progression.
Sure. Yeah. And I think recalling back then, you know, and I might ask you to actually explain what were some of the challenges that you were actually experiencing, because I know that they are very common for other horse owners. Mm-hmm. And so maybe you just touch on what were the issues that you were experiencing that you were frustrated with that made you go and look for answers.
Okay, so the horse that started this whole saga for me, he arrived here 2 years ago. Just quickly, he had a terrible stable accident when he arrived and got very sick. Had to have a lot of treatment for probably 6 months, which involved a lot of medication, a lot of drugs, a lot of different food, obviously having a big impact on him. By the time it was ready for him to come home and start living, as you took him off these drugs and his medications and what have you, colic was just a common occurrence. If it wasn't happening once a week, it was happening twice.
That's so frightening. I can't imagine.
Sometimes really mild versions of that didn't make you sort of pick yourself up and go, okay, but sometimes versions of all hands on deck. Mm-hmm. So we were starting, this went on for a long time. It would have had to have been well over 6 months. And we really started to have to say, is the horse's welfare?
Yeah.
Is it coming first?
Yeah.
but there was just something about him. And, you know, when he would peak and you go, I'm on top of it, and then he'd crash.
Yeah.
And you go, what caused it this time? His immune system was so low. It just couldn't handle any form of upset whatsoever.
Yeah. And you were using quite a lot of different supplements, I think, when we...
You name it, I've tried it. Yes. You know, and it's hard not to change things quickly. And people say, you know, you've got to let things sit there and take their time. But when you've got a horse colicking so badly, so often, you don't have time.
Yes.
You're like, is this not working? It hasn't made a difference. Get him off it.
Yeah.
It could be making it worse.
Yeah.
It's just...
Well, it's like death almost for him when he's colicking regularly.
Well, you're waiting for it to be the last time. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times we had the float and car permanently parked outside the stables. Oh, gosh, I didn't
actually realise it was that serious.
Yeah, waiting for it to be that bad.
Yeah.
You just had to keep making calls. And of course, somehow this horse knew Sundays were a great time for it to be that bad. And maybe around 2 o'clock in the morning.
Why not?
Yeah, but it was... you know, I had a great team of vets, a great team of everybody, and we're all doing our best. Yeah. But it just wasn't making a difference. Yeah. It just wasn't. And then he'd go on to antibiotics because the bloods would say there'd be an infection. But we're like, where is... Meanwhile, the horse looked $1 million.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because what we know about gut health, we think the good gut bacteria determine everything. So you would think if a horse has a really stressed gut, they wouldn't look well. But that's the challenge, I guess, and the frustration of it all. They can look great, but inside it can be so unbalanced.
Such different story.
What's wrong with you?
Yeah. So, and it was, and that's the whole thing. And it's just like, and that's hard because then you've got people looking at the horse and looking at you going, there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, yeah. And what about under saddle? What was he like in terms of behaviour and consistency in work and out?
Okay, so when I first bought him, when I had him in Europe for 6 months before I brought him home, and I have to say, I mean, there's a reason why I bought him. He's a lovely horse. He did have little quirks. Mm-hmm. There were a few concerns for me sometimes. Whether you put that in horse getting to know rider getting to know horse scenarios. Yep. When he was brought home, he was a horse that you would go, whoa, he's a big horse, and he did like to just go. And there was no warning. He was a horse that would suck behind the contact a lot. He was a horse that, you know, all the stars had to align for him to work well. In saying that, I could put a professional rider on him and you go, oh, wow, okay, is it me? Yeah. But what someone would get out of him for one ride wouldn't necessarily mean what they could get out of him for 5 rides. Yeah. Yeah. It was very inconsistent, as well as dealing with, he was only here a few weeks before he got cast in the box. So, you know, I'm like, is it the leg? Is it this? Is it that? Is it what's causing what? Chicken or the egg? Yeah. But to ride sometimes for me, he would really scare me. Like, to be completely honest, he's 18 hands and 900 kilos on a good day. So
a lot of horse. Yeah.
It is a lot of horse, and you just. I thought, is it my nerves? Have I made him nervous? Does that make does that make him gassy? Does that make him this? Yeah. Not knowing.
Questions, isn't it? And that's what I have loved about learning about gut health, because you go to bed at night and you're going over all those things, but what we didn't know was about the power of the gut bacteria. And you think about his journey. So he's done this big trip from overseas, and now we know from gut bacteria, they would have been smashed. So he rides to already compromised. Change of diet, climate, atmosphere, you name it, more stress. And then he hurts himself, more stress. Mm-hmm. So he's a bit of a champion, this boy, because he has coped and coped and coped. And thank goodness, we're going to talk about what's happened, what the results you've got now. And then we'll go back and talk about how we've achieved it. I'm thinking this is like quite stressful, but there's great news.
Yes, and that's the thing. And look, I was making 2 phone calls that day. One for help and one to book a flight for him to go back to Europe. Wow. And that's where I was at, because I thought I can't make this horse live this life.
Wow. Yeah.
Maybe Australia isn't for him, or maybe I'm not for him. I felt guilty because I feel, not that it was my fault that the accident happened, but it happened in my care. So I felt guilty about that, and then sending him back to Europe because of that. But this horse can't keep colicking. Can he not live in Australia, eat our food, be in our environment? So I'm like, this is my last shot. Either I get the help he needs, if not, he has to go back so he can continue to live. That's I've got no choice.
I'm glad you made that call to me and not the airline.
Oh, don't worry. I had them on. I can't tell you how many times before I had booked him on a flight. Thank God for COVID in a sense, because they're like, Kylie, we're not flying at the moment. Well, make sure he's on the first flight when you do book. Oh, don't worry. I like him this week. He hasn't college. Oh, no. He's So we were going back and forth. But to get to where we are now, oh my God, I'm very lucky. And it's not just like, because I've worked very hard at it and we have been very patient, but he's a completely different horse.
Let's talk about it. Let's talk about
I love him. I can remember calling you after all the changes we made, and this seems ridiculous. I've ridden Grand Prix, I've competed, I've had horses come from Europe. I'm not normally a scared rider, but I was so excited to tell you I rode him in a snaffle bridle.
Oh, I remember that.
His whole being, his whole wanting to work, wanting to be ridden, wanting to do things with you, and you could read him like a book. There wasn't this erratic behavior. He just was consistent and has stayed that way. I can give this horse 3 days off now and hop on him. No lunging required.
So exciting. It is so exciting.
He's just normal. Yes, he's got a long way to go because his body work, muscle work, and learning how to do his job. But as far as being ridden and not having to deal with colic and being consistent and all these things.
Colic episodes twice a week anymore?
No. No, I'm not getting a colic. And I'll be really honest. We've had 2 mild episodes in this time. I think it's sort of been a good 6 months, I'm thinking, where we've had a mild case, and then only just last week we had another mild case, to the point where I put him on the float because I panicked, took him to the hospital, took him off, and they said, is Boulevard just here for a sleepover? I said, I think so. He got there, he goes, oh great, I'm back here again. So he didn't require any treatment. They just looked at him and said, there's nothing wrong with him, come pick him up.
Wow.
So I was very lucky. We do believe that it does have something to do with a drastic weather change for him. His blood pressure seems to drop a little bit, and that's something that we have to sort of figure out and be aware of, if there's anything we can do. I did this weekend try a little theory because we had another storm front and what have you. So it worked. We have had no colic. So that was good with a massive weather change. It's a matter of just keeping on top of it and predicting it before it starts, because we feel it, they feel it before.
What did you do in anticipation?
So what I did is, he normally gets a little bit of stress pace every day. He doesn't need it. I'm a little bit scared to stop it. I've got to learn to get over that. That's my problem, not his. But what I did was I started before the weather change. And before I went to bed, normally I wouldn't do it. Normally I'd do it before he has his hard feed in the afternoon, and I wouldn't do it again at night, hay or anything like that. So this time I left the gap a lot longer between his afternoon feed and his night hay. And then I gave him a whole tube to get through the night.
And that worked?
Well, he didn't colic, and I even took the car off the float. So that's a big change.
Love it. And it just takes the pressure off you, doesn't it? I mean, we love our horses so much. And when you are constantly on tenterhooks going, what's going to happen? I think that's what I love about gut health. It's giving us the control back. That's what
control and confidence. And there's nothing worse than being stuck at home. You know, I don't like to leave the horses at the best of time, even when things are well. I am a bit of a homebody, so it suits me. I think sometimes I use them as an excuse to stay home. But in his case, I couldn't handle leaving him on someone else's watch and it being their responsibility to make the call. So I confidently now drive out my driveway and don't think about him.
How brilliant is that?
You know, I know he's safe. I mean, I do have a camera on him, which is on my phone. But I'm not sticking around waiting, and I'm not thinking every day, I don't think of colic.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get there. And in the middle of the night, if I heard a bump over in the stables, I was up and looking at cameras and no, okay, it was nothing. It actually wasn't even the stables. So it takes a long time to get over that. Because it's where you want to go to first.
Yeah.
But it's getting there.
That's great. And I think if it isn't 12 months, it's getting close to it, which is interesting because we know that in general, the gut bacteria can take about 12 months to reestablish. And given he was coming from such a poor base, that I remember in our first conversations, it was a bit like, it could be a coincidence, but, and I love that because you know the change is starting to happen. But after 12 months, you're starting to consolidate, the gut's more resilient, and that he's then got enough army of helpers, the right helpers to cope with the stress. So Boulevard gets to stay. You get to you're going to be able to compete on him and enjoy this incredible, magnificent animal who now can be his best version of himself because he's not in any pain. And the thing is, and I always sort of preface this by saying, it's not about making people feel guilty. If we don't know about gut health, we can't address it. But the reality is he would have had pain and inflammation and not enough good guys to create, a healthy gut. So now you know, and you picked up the phone, and I remember you asked me so many great questions and you trusted the process. That's a big deal. And I know that you're a point of view.
It's hard because you're sort of at that point when I went, I've got to make a change and I've got to understand. So every horse teaches you something. And in the past, I've had horses come over and their feet have been terrible and fallen apart and couldn't handle the change in environment. And that horse has made me an expert in feet. But you learn. And this horse, obviously, I thought I knew, but what I had sort of got to where I was just desperate. So I'd read a label and go, oh, it says it does this. Great. I'll just use it. And that's when all of a sudden you turn around and you go, I've got 3 supplements here that all say they're doing the same, but my horse is still colicking twice a week. And then all of a sudden I look and there's just powders on powders and wetting this and soaking this. And I'm like, oh, someone stop me. I can't do this.
I get it because I was exactly like you, which is why we started Poseidon, because it's like, I don't understand why these products aren't doing what they're supposed to do. I didn't understand gut health like I do now. So it's so exciting. You've had this huge transformation. Let's chat about what changes you have made since you've been working with us and what have you learned through this process?
Okay, so the changes I've made, I can't ever say my horses were on a high grain diet because they're just not. But we first addressed the diet due to the symptoms. Now, one thing I knew for sure that a lot of his symptoms was from gas. He would get gas in his abdomen and then would have problems. Fixing that up, no Lucerne, no this. And everyone says, oh, your horse has stomach problems. Feed it Lucerne, feed it this, feed it. Yes, absolutely do all those things, but not for certain horses. Every horse is a little bit individual when it comes to diet. So just because one diet works for one horse doesn't mean I have many horses they're not all on the same diet. So that's just my reality right now.
Sure. And sorry to interrupt you, Kylie. You worked with Sam Potter, didn't you, with that, our new 20
Yes, yeah, which was great because it allowed it to be quite individual.
Yeah.
And so that was easy. And to tell you the truth, it was quite easy. And have I tweaked it over the 6 to 12 months, depending on what I'm doing?
Yeah.
Absolutely. You learn and you go, you know what? That's a bit too much energy for him. He's really not doing that work because he's getting enough energy just from his hay and grass. Yeah. He doesn't even need that. Especially, and you just could play, but you're playing with base. Yes. You're just playing with base.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's so easy. And my feed bill went down dramatically, but also the room I was taking to store all this feed. And it's just really basic. I don't think about it. I just don't think about it. And it's so nice not to have to think about that stuff because I have done my head in for 2 years.
And everyone has an opinion. And that's why we have amazing nutritionists that work with us because they're qualified. They're not just somebody on the forum saying, hey, why don't you try this? They know what they're doing. And if we're selling evidence-based products, we want to have the best diet to go with it. So it's interesting you mentioned his energy improved. As the helpful bacteria increase in numbers, you've got more good guys to turn the hay and the grass into energy. So you do exactly what you need to do. You cut back on the other high energy foods because they can survive, like as long as the vitamins and minerals are balanced, they can live on just a fiber-based diet. A racehorse, an eventer, that's a different story, but
absolutely. But he's, and the fact that he's not really even doing competition work, I mean, he's just, pondering about the sand arena, trying to build up, but he still needs energy to build those muscles. He still needs good food to build and grow and develop. And so it was really hard. And I can remember actually a conversation with you. I said, this sounds really weird, but he almost feels, there are times when he feels like he's going to explode, but it doesn't go anywhere. It's just like it stays longer. The energy is longer. It's not short spurts of energy that sort of goes everywhere. It just sort of kept going. And I'm like, oh, he's not going to explode. Oh, he's not being naughty. He just feels good.
It's trainable.
It's weird. It was really weird. And I'm like, is that normal? Is that I'm like, is that the product? Is that the food? Is that the what's going on here? Why do I feel like this? And the first time I felt it, I sort of grabbed the reins and went, hey, buddy, what's going on? And I did get worried. I went, oh, don't tell me we're falling back into old ways. And then I went, Kylie, worst case scenario, let it go and see what happens. And I let the reins go. And I said, all right, do what you will. Yeah. And he just kept going. Sort of, I'm sure he was looking back at me going, why would she do that?
They just stay with
you. So it's quite strange, but when you're not used to it and when you've sort of had things a certain way for so long, you're like, oh, okay, new normal.
Exactly.
Right, get used to that.
Differently, because all of a sudden you've got this trainable athletic horse with this beautiful energy that doesn't mean they're about to take off on you. I always think about the gut's over 30 meters long and it's inflamed, then they're in pain. Like girthiness is behind gut health because it can get inflamed. So all of a sudden you get on this horse that's got less pain, less inflammation, has got this freedom to just stretch out. You've got this trainable brain. It becomes this, it's like you move together and becomes like this dance then.
It's a different feeling and it's not, he's not all of a sudden, going to be the world's best dressage horse, but it's now so easy for me because I can say that needs discipline, Boulevard. No, you do have to do that.
Yes.
Not, oh God, what's wrong with you? What's this? What's that? It's so consistent that I can make decisions now when I ride rather than riding going, oh, is that, should it, you just don't know.
Yeah.
So it's really, you can tell they're reliable in their body. They're really they just keep going.
Yep. So we've made diet changes. Let's talk a little bit about what you felt some of the products what role, I guess, they've played in all of that as well.
Well, So we changed, and we didn't really put him on the supplements to start off. It was a matter of getting him off everything that he had been on. So the diet change came first, and we did that very slowly. And we introduced, I think we just started off with the Digestive EQ and a small amount.
Yes.
So, and we did that over time. And then once he was stable on the diet, and we had got to the right amount of digestive EQ, then I started him on the VM as well.
The vitamin.
Yeah, because his food, it was just balanced. Yeah, it didn't have any additives in it. It didn't have any of that. So he, of course, was going to need to be supplemented for what we wanted to do with him. So it was really, that was easy. And the fact that I've only got 2 things in my supplement, I'm like, is that normal? Shouldn't I have more? And it's funny because we laugh and we're like, let's just get some random buckets and put them in many buckets so we feel at home. Like, it's ridiculous, but it was a shock because you're like, oh, is this normal? But it took little changes, like the manure, you noticed a little bit of a difference, and it wasn't all of a sudden this instant thing. It wasn't. It was just gradual, and I think that's when I was talking to you a lot, asking you more and more questions, going, is it meant to do this? Is it meant to do that? Is it meant to? Because it just kept evolving into something better and better. And to tell you the truth, I still find things that he had done in the past, and you go, he's kept up all of a sudden. Even now, I just go, you're a lot better there. You're a lot better in that area. You know, his temperament, I can't tell you. I used to walk around with a chain. He used to have a chain on him. And he's not a naughty horse, but he just was that way. Yeah. One minute he'd be fine, and the next minute he'd be quite upset. Oh my, it's a pleasure to go and collect him from the paddock. I used to go, you go get him.
Who would have thought, Kylie, that honestly, in terms of, this is why I get so excited about gut bacteria and gut health, because who would have thought that this knowledge around the importance of gut bacteria would be so transformational? And it truly is. Like, I love the joy in your voice and the relief and the journey. And it's obviously not just him, you've had other horses on their own journey.
Yeah.
It's just like this missing piece, but the most, I think it starts from there. Like, feed the right bacteria, you get the results you want.
Yeah.
It involves management and diet. So,
and you think you've got your, and I've always said, you know, when I started off with these horses, and they are a little bit special coming from one place to another, it's a completely different environment for them. And while some horses seem to just cruise through and not notice a difference, like my older one, he came here as a 5-year-old, honestly, he just fitted in, didn't skip a beat. Never been a problem. But you do get the sensitive ones, which somehow I'm attracted to. But I built a village, and it takes a village. Yeah. And so you have to have good vets, good farriers, and, you know, good trainers, good dentists, good this, good that. And I thought my village was together, and I'm like, okay, somehow I thought that system being internal, something that I couldn't see, I'm like, falls into this category, falls into vets and this, and but they can only do so much. They can, you know, and I'm just like, but the gut and feeding, it's a whole new person to come to the village. It's like, oh no, you need to have a separate section just for that, because otherwise, you know, everyone thinks their section is just as important as everything else. And it's just like, well, it's all important. It's my job as his owner to turn around then and make sure the village is working for him.
Yeah, I love that analogy.
You know, otherwise, what hope did he have?
Yeah.
And I can honestly say, if I hadn't have made a drastic change for him, there is no way he would have been here today. I know it 100%. Wow. So it hasn't finished yet, because of course now I want to start competing him, and now I want his fitness to get up to be able to go out and compete. Well, it's going to put stress on him because he's already been really stressed for a large time whilst being here. So I'm going to have to really be on top of it.
And I think, Kylie, just on that, sorry to cut you off there, that you're working with a different base this time. His gut will be more resilient. So by you using the stress pace the other night before the storm, you gave him the resilience he needs. So, but at least now you're acknowledging when we stress our horses, it has the potential impact internally, which can affect behavior, etc. So what we're going to do is keep the gut as healthy as we can at all times, which you're doing, and then allow for some extra stress. So using the stress pace strategically, or the stress dose of digestive EQ, or if you need to add some more energy, what's the best way to add energy? Do I add more linseed oil? Do I increase some cooked grain? Do I add extra fiber? What do I do to keep the gut in the best position to cope with that stress? And I have no doubt that he will transition into that much more, I guess, seamlessly than what he would have 12 months ago. So
absolutely.
Just preparing for that stress and managing it.
I think, to tell you the truth, I think it's me, a lot of the times, because I'm like, well, this problem was his stomach. It was everything to do with his digestive system. He couldn't have transformed by coincidence. He couldn't have transformed by just it being time. No, time was actually making it worse. Sure. Time wasn't. So I know the fact throughout this, you learn by getting positive results that, okay, you're on track. It is his digestive system. There's major problems there, and you have to keep on top of it, because I just don't, as long as he was unwell, it's going to take time. And I know he's strong and he's stoic. Otherwise, putting him on the float and just threatening to drive him to the hospital would have been enough to turn him around and bring him back now. But it's one of those things where you just go, is he really ready? And he won't know. Well, we will know in probably 3 weeks. He's going out to his first competition. So we will know by the end of that. Yeah. But I just didn't think I'd be here. I just didn't think he'd be here.
It's so good.
But not only be here, but have such a great horse. Like, he's better than what he was when I bought him. And I loved him then. But he's just, I'm more excited about him now than what it was when I first bought him.
That's so good.
Because he's mine now. Like, I've created this. I know how to handle him. I know how to look after him. I know what's good for him. So I have so much more confidence. And when I hop on him, and every horse has a bad day and goes, I don't want to work today. Well, I'm like, yes, you are going to work. Come on, let's go. We're going. Yeah. I'm not backing off.
Yeah.
And by doing that, he respects me more. So our relationship as far as horse and rider has just come ahead so quickly. And who would have thought, because I stopped and started again with what he needed.
Yeah.
So it's endless.
Well, and you've been so patient. I think what I liked is that you trusted me when I was saying we've got to be patient. It's taken years to create this, gut that's not as healthy as it should be.
Yeah.
Often as horse owners, and we have lots of clients that go, I've tried what you've suggested and it's been a month and I've seen no change. And I've got to remind people, you can't create, if it's an 8-year-old horse and it could have had gut problems since birth, because we know the gut microbiome's foals are born with no gut bacteria. They get it from their mothers and, the environment around them. So they've had years and years of creating this dysfunction. We can't expect to fix in 1 month. And I think as horse owners, we have to realize so many of the problems our horses have, we have created. And so therefore we've just got to allow time for it to repair. And you trusted me the whole time through that process. So
but it's nice when you can turn around and I get it. And I have got a great vet who has been here every step of the way. And sometimes you got to remember, over the years, I've suggested things to him and he rolls his eyes and goes, oh, the princess is at it again with her ponies, coming up and reinventing the wheel. But it's so good to be able to ring either Sam or you and say, are you sure this is right? Are you sure this is what's happening? Are you sure we can go forward with this? And it's just like to have people say, yep, we're good. keep going, we're good. So you need that. I think when you're desperate and you've gone backwards so much, you really need someone to give you a bit of a push to say, keep going.
Absolutely. And I think that's why we at Poseidon are so committed to we have microbiologists, we have nutritionists, we have vets, because this is still our awareness and knowledge of gut health is still very new. We've had such a focus on just the stomach or the gastric part of the health.
Yeah.
And we've had an over-reliance on gastric ulcer treatment. Let's look at the rest of the gut. I'm not saying gastric ulcer treatment doesn't have a role, but bigger than that, and we haven't known about it. So, I just get so excited sharing this stuff because it changes. I mean, listen to your story. It's changed everything.
Well, and I we go because of the medication. They're like, oh, he'll have ulcers, he'll have this. And I'm like, all right, well, let's look into that. And of course, you can only scope so much and you can only see so much. But they'd scope this horse and they'd go, he looks fantastic. There's nothing wrong with him. And then they go, oh, it's the way you look after him or the way you do this with him. And, oh, there's nothing wrong with him. And it's just like, well, there is. Yeah. He doesn't choose to lie down on the ground and groan for 4 hours. It's not a choice. Yeah. But it was sort of having the confidence then, once you start getting new information in your head and you learn and you go, why? Sure. Why do I need this? And once you start asking the questions and you learn the information, you go, I've got this. Yeah. I've got this. So I don't need to ask everybody. I've got this. And I've got the information I need.
Confidence in that process. That's so great. So, Kylie, let's just chat a little bit about, I guess, I'm very upfront about saying Poseidon isn't just about making evidence-based products. It's bigger than that. Can you just share briefly, we've kind of touched on this, what support were you offered by Poseidon along your journey?
Basically, I was at the first, I think the girls in the office could tell they're like, oh, we need to spoon feed this one. She's at her wit's ends. So it was good. And look, I think the first conversation I had, I really liked hearing, I'm going to have to find that out. That's a tricky one, because it was a tricky one, because there were so many outside factors coming in on the one horse. And so it was just like, give me a minute. I need to make some phone calls. And of course, your first thought is, I'm not going to hear back. But I did hear back with more people on board, and just the access to be able to turn around and go, yeah, no, I know who to ring for that. Yeah. I'll find out. Oh, no, I know how to do it, because we had to ride a wave because many changes happen. Of course, the horse goes up and down, and are we doing the right thing? And so you do need nutritionists, you do need dietitians, and you do need to balance it out. I can look at a bag and I can say, okay, this has to mean this. But I'm looking at bags and I'm like, I clean horse boxes, I don't want to go down the rabbit warren. Yeah. I don't want to be that involved to the point where I go, at the end of the day, I have to look after him, not know numbers and everything. I need help with that. And that's why it was just easy.
Great.
It just made it easy. And forever be grateful, forever. It's one of those things that I think with this horse in particular, but there are lots of differences on the farm because they're all on it. Because I needed to get rid of all those supplements. I had to get rid of them all. So they all went on, even down to the companion pony who gets laminitis. Yeah. Everyone's on it now. The horse with the skin condition. Once you start to understand about the gut health and what it's doing and how it's helping the gut, you go, oh, actually, they need this makes sense.
How are they going? How's the laminitic pony and the skin condition? Have you seen any changes there yet?
Well, we don't have a skin condition and we don't have a laminitic pony, so yeah. I don't know if I've convinced my vet yet on the laminitic pony. He's just like, how though? Oh. I'm like, it's on the product. I said, it just has this product. He goes, yeah, but how? Yep. I'm like, look, it hasn't got laminitis anymore, and it's out in a paddock, and it doesn't have grazing muddles, and it doesn't have restrictions, and it gets fed. And yes, of course, I don't leave it in a green field of grass and all the rest of it, but It's not sore. It doesn't have a crusty neck. It's trotting around the paddock. It's got more attitude than it really needs to for a companion pony. And I'm like, that's all it's on. So I said to the vet, well, what is it then?
And you know what, Kylie? The reality is we don't know enough. We know there is a link to hindgut serous acidosis and laminitis, but we have lots of people tell us the same story, and even when we get with Dr. Nerida Richards and we say we're not really sure, is it due to different processing of fructans? We don't know, but all we know is gut bacteria are responsible for so much more than we have any idea about. And I just go, you know what, I'll take it. If your little pony is having we'll take
I don't know. Like, how can it fix one horse's skin and one laminitic pony and then help Boulevard with his colicking? Like, I'm like, what? It just
magic.
It's sort of magic. And I think I remember saying to you not long ago, I'm like, is it meant to do this as well? Because this is what it's doing. And I've even had, you know, I had the privilege throughout COVID, the lockdown, of doing rehab on a racehorse, and he was in a real bad way, and that was another long stretch of rehabbing him back to a life, and he's at the trainers now. And they were going to put him down, and I'm like, I hope he does well, because I took 25% of that one. But he's still like, he got packed off to the trainers with his supplements, and they look at me and I say, that's fine. If you're not going to do it, don't call me when you're taking it to the vets.
Yeah.
And I'm not paying the bill, because if you give it, the vets don't come. So give the supplement, the vets don't come. That's how we work.
The amazing story you told me about him when he had that early on, that really bad colic episode.
Yeah.
And do you mind just sharing that really quickly about what you
did? Yeah, so he had quite an aggressive colic episode. And it was to the point where we couldn't even no longer walk him, or we had to put him in a box because it wasn't safe for us to be handling him. And he was thrashing, and he was lashing out and very uncomfortable, and it was really just fast. And the vet couldn't get there for 20 minutes. And I honestly didn't think he was going to make 20 minutes. He would throw himself down and then get himself up. So we had shoved a stress, in desperate, I just went, just get a stress brace, and we shoved it down his throat. Anyway, this kept going on, and he got himself worked up, and eventually he sort of settled down a little bit, and I'm like, well, he's probably exhausted at this point. Didn't think anything much of it. The vet arrived, and the horse was just standing still against the wall, leaning on the wall. And the vets looked at us and said, well, what's wrong with him? And we're like, oh, he's colicking really badly. And he goes, really? Okay. And he said, look, he does sound a little upset in there, but took his temperature, checked his gums, took everything, took some blood, and went, there's really nothing I can do for him. And this horse did not move a muscle for about 2 hours, just stood still, did not move. And then all of a sudden started moving around and went, oh, I'm hungry. Were we meant to have had breakfast? And I went, what just happened? What just happened?
I love that story, because I've had quite a few people tell me a very similar thing. So I'm not making any claims that our stress paste will fix colic, but it's just interesting that.
No, and I would hate to sort of say that in the fact that someone says, oh, just give it stress paste and walk away. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. And they're all on the digestive EQ. So whether it's the upping the dose, you know, because they get the stress paste, I don't know. There's no I just go, well, I just do it. And I literally, as you know, I buy it by the box full.
Yeah.
And I just have it sitting there, and sometimes it's not needed, which is fine. Great. Guess what? It can just sit in the cupboard. Yeah. No problem. But when it is needed, I know for me, I don't go for the bute anymore.
Yeah.
I go for the stress paste.
Yeah. Which is not going to have the damage to the gut like some of those anti-inflammatories can have.
And absolutely, but as with horses with colic and what have you, you think, oh, it needs pain meds, and it's just like, yeah, well, it does in a sense, but it needs something else to stop it from being that way in the first place.
I'll reach for that, the stress paste before anything now. It's like, okay, stress paste, if they're still sore in a couple of days, I'll try a little bit of Butte. But 9 times out of 10, it's like, okay, whatever was happening. There's so many actives in the stress paste. That's what makes it such a cool product that, you know, it will achieve.
But also, it's just nice to have. You don't think about it. You turn around, you go, oh, it's been really hot for 3 days. These horses have been locked up. They haven't gone out much. Or if you've got to float one somewhere, well, and they love it. My horses actually think it's a treat. So, and now I know the first formula that was done, it was sort of like, it was a little bit hard to get out of the tube, but it wasn't. And you're like, oh God.
It was stressful now to feed it, to get it out of the tube.
I know. But now it's quite oily, and it almost tastes, it doesn't taste, I haven't tasted it. It smells like nuts, you know, and
it is nutty. I've tasted it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's easy and it's quick and it's just there, and you just buy it, have it in your cupboard, and I'm like, that's all I can stop thinking. Like, I was getting so exhausted about thinking how to look after them. I didn't have any energy left to enjoy them. And I was just like, if this doesn't change, I'm giving up horses. Like, I was serious.
The amount of money on vet bills, and, you know, we love our vets, but gosh, we've spent some money over the years, and, you know, my vet bills have gone right down because they don't really have anything go wrong. And obviously,
well, my vet calls in here now to check. We've got horses. What's going on? and they're always needed. The village is always needed, of course. And they're all so important. I just didn't. I thought I'd completed my village, but I realised I hadn't completed the village.
Yeah.
So I think it's always evolving. Yeah. But there's one thing I don't have to think about now, just like I don't think about their feet, because I know I've got the best people helping me with that. And I don't worry about all these little things. And now I don't worry about that.
As you said,
I still have to do things for it, but I don't have to worry about it.
And there's a reward. You get to enjoy it. You have a ride, and you get to, I don't know. And I think we've got thousands of clients now, but people report back they've seen a change in their horses, almost their personality. They become, I don't know, happy or happy or this. Well, look, when we're in pain, we're not happy people. So how can our horses be completely calm and relaxed if they're in pain? And for some of our horses, they've had gut pain and gut problems since a foal. And now I've learned that when people ring and they say the horse has had these problems for years, I say, tell me, do you know anything about the birth? Do you know anything about the mother? What was the diet? And they go, they're in drought conditions. It was, you know, it came early, it had trouble suckling. And then I just go, right. So right from birth, this horse hasn't had the right bacteria.
Yeah.
And, you know, bacteria are really, really powerful. They will change the environment for their survival. So it's almost like, and we don't have research on this yet, but my theory is the gut bacteria keep the environment acidic. I feel like only weeds grow in drought. Only bad bacteria thrive, and toxins and pathogens thrive in an acidic gut. And so then they don't make as many B vitamins, which means the horse is more stressed, they're in more pain, they don't digest food properly, and it just becomes this vicious cycle, and our horses get sicker and sicker and sicker and start colicking and then laminitis. But now we know that gut bacteria is everything. So, you know, maybe the gut bacteria part of your village, maybe that's who it is, because they are very powerful.
It's the more you learn, it's logical.
It is.
You know, and horses aren't complicated. You know, they look complicated, but you just, if it's logical, if it makes sense, you go, right, I understand that.
I love that. I try and say to everyone, if we know gut bacteria determine everything, performance, stride length, you know, appetite, behavior, you name it, if they determine everything, don't you want the right ones on your side? And so everything we do, we've got to think, are we supporting good bacteria or bad bacteria? It's as simple as that. And then you can make it, without making complicated, you can do things like, well, I'm about to go out and compete a lot more, which means more transport. We're going to be out in the heat. There's going to be more competition. So I know that's going to have an impact. I need to make sure I manage all those stresses as best I can. So we can plan, but if we don't know this stuff, how can we change? Like you thought you had.
But if you don't know, and it's okay not to know.
Yes.
And it's okay to want to not, you know, how far do you go? Depending on what you want out of your horse is how far you go. No one wants to see their horse in pain, but you've got to keep it relative to what you can do. And I'm doing less to look after the horses than what I've ever done. But it's because I know what works and what doesn't work for that horse, or what that horse does need or doesn't need, and it just makes it so much easier.
We've got that help on the agenda. It's the first item on the meeting. We're talking about
yeah. Well, and it's nice to be able to pick up a phone.
Yeah.
It's seriously nice to be able to pick up a phone or write a quick email or shoot a message and say, hey, have you heard of this before? Because the more people that talk about it, the more people that can get help from and go, yes, we did have a horse similar to that. And this is how their story went. And it's just like, well, you know, it's no use keeping it all secret squirrel. You've got to sort of put yourself out there and go, well, I had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
And I should have known, and I could ring many different people and many experienced people, but it wasn't working. It wasn't helping. And it's just like, it was just lots of opinions, but I wasn't learning anything. I couldn't figure it out.
It's still so new, and knowledge and awareness is still so new. So I love now working with very experienced vets that are really honest and say, we haven't learned about this. It's the same as humans. A lot of doctors.
Yeah.
You know, it changes everything. So Kylie, I guess that's why we've done this interview, for all those reasons, so you can share your story. If you could maybe, and I might be putting you on the spot here, three tips that you would have for anybody who perhaps hasn't even had any contact with Poseidon, hasn't used our products, or is really struggling, have you got any tips for them that you'd like to share?
Okay, so the first thing I did before I made the phone call was I wrote down a list. What has worked, what hasn't worked, what his behavior was, what it wasn't, when things were good, when they were bad, when he colicked, what other factors could have been related. You know, was it the vet coming out? Was it the feet being done? Was it this? Was it that? All these different things. And it's just like, so I had a list, because then when someone asks you a question, you can you gain confidence from going, no, I do know my horse.
Yeah.
Because when you're put on the spot a little bit, you're like, oh, I don't know. But you do know, you just can't think of it at the time. Yeah. So my first tip is write everything down, keep a diary, ask the questions. Don't be embarrassed or shy or think that people are going to think you're stupid or any of those things, because no one really cares. No one cares. Everyone just wants to do their job. And if people are working to do this, they want to tell you about it. They want to help you. They want you to know everything they know. So you just have to put it out there. Because what have you got to lose?
That's right.
You don't really have anything to lose. So that was my best thing. I went, you know what? I know I'm supposed to know how to look after this horse, and I know I'm supposed to be a horse person and this and a dressage rider and a trainer and all. I know what I'm supposed to be, but right now I'm none of these things because I cannot keep this horse upright.
Yeah.
So you just got to let it go. And the more you let it go, the more you figure things out too. So the conversation, it's just a conversation worth having. So you need to have it, but it's no use having it with Joe Blow down the road who doesn't specialize in what your horse is going through. So yeah, that's it.
You made the point before about when you first contacted us and you thought that we might not get back to you. I had the same experience before I started Poseidon. I contacted a lot of companies and they didn't get back to me, didn't acknowledge my email, or couldn't answer the questions, particularly when I'd say things like, if it's a gut supplement, why is it full of molasses and grain? And they couldn't answer, and I just got very frustrated. And it was like, well, or I'm a bit like you, feeding so many supplements, but still not getting the results I wanted. So I was like, well, there's got to be another way, and it's got to be simpler. We love our horses. We spend our time, our money, our energy, everything with them. And yet we still aren't enjoying them as much. So this is why gut health is a game changer. So anybody watching this today might go, oh, that resonated. That makes sense to me. I didn't think about that. We are available. We have a great team, as you know. There's people at the other end of the phone that will return the call. And as you know, I would check in. I reckon you got a phone call from me or a text every.
Yeah.
It was like every few days.
But
how's it going?
It was exciting as well, I suppose, because you knew what was the end result, where we were going. I had to go on the journey, sort of. I didn't know what the end result was going to be because I really hadn't got. I suppose you've always thought you were looking after your horse's gut, and you always fed because, you know, you've tried things over the years. Like I can tell you, I had a lot of supplements in there that said gut health on them. And you know, for this horse and for it's just for my farm and the way I run my farm, I'm not going to turn around and tell people who have got my other horses how to run their stables and their farm. That's their choice. And education and them wanting to know more about it is the only way it's going to change that. So you can't go in and bombard and say to people, well, you all have to do this because it's the only thing to do. It's just like once you learn why you're doing it, then you go, oh, great, don't have to worry about it anymore.
And I think, hopefully you'll agree with this, I never made you feel stupid it was almost like, I get where you've been. I've been there. I understand the frustration and the challenges. And I remember taking a horse all the way down to Werribee from Wollongong, and I knew he was going to lose weight. Off the track horse. I knew he was going to get stressed. I knew it was going to be hot. And it's like, well, what am I going to do? And I try whatever was around at the time. We got down there and he lost weight. He got anxious. It was just a disaster, which is one of the reasons why eventually we end up creating stress pace, because I realized you might not always see the impact of stress, but it's happening. Like humans, it can be very silent, but it's working its way. So it's trying to work out what our horses need. And I've done it based on my own experience. So the last thing I want to do is make anyone feel stupid, because I remember thinking some of the things I've done in the past. You remember those big tuck tubs, those really big coloured tuck tubs? Well, I wanted to put on weight. I'm just going to fill it up as much as I can. And now I realise, he's really fussy. I can't get him to eat. I'm just going to pour molasses over everything. I look back and go, they were all the mistakes I made, but I'm glad I did, because it's now led to Poseidon, and now I get to hear about you and Boulevard and your other.
And that's, everyone's got those stories, and everyone goes, oh, that's, you know, we did this back in the day, and we used to do this, and we used to do that, and great, but this is the whole reason why information is easy to get hold of now, and why we can sit and go on the internet and learn and do all these things. You have to evolve with it. You can't ignore the information. And yes, just because there's new products out there, I mean, it's hard. There are so many companies, there are so many products, there are so many everything. And where do you start? But I wanted to actually not have to think about it. And that's why I made the call. But I didn't want to think about it anymore, because I'm like, I don't want the decision to be mine. And if it's the wrong one, then it's mine again. I don't want to make a wrong decision.
You're being discerning as well. Like, I think that as horse owners, we are so keen just to try the next supplement or the next fad. And
absolutely.
We shouldn't take advice from. So I am, you know, that's why Poseidon has such a commitment to education as well, from all the people that you mentioned.
Yeah.
So that, you know, you don't have to wonder. You're dealing with people that are very capable, very experienced, that you know you're getting the right advice. And so I'm very grateful for all the people in my village to be able to offer that to you, because I'm sick of guessing, because when we guess, we don't get it right. And then
no, you don't. And it adds more stress. Yeah. And then under stress, you make more bad decisions. It's literally a snowball going down a hill, just getting bigger and bigger. And you get to the bottom and you go, well, where did I go wrong at the start? But you can always look back. I look back and I knew where I went wrong after I was at the bottom. But in the process of falling down the hill and the horse colicking every 5 minutes, I'm like, what am I doing wrong? But it wasn't until you got to the bottom and then you start climbing out of it, you go, I could see where that could have gone. Yeah, I could see where I was heading.
You can join the dots now, but you think about it, through Boulevard's journey, you've now changed so many horses in your life. Now, this video will get shared widely. There will be people that listen to this and go, that's my horse, it's colicking every week. I didn't know I could do this. So that's what I love about this weekend. And I love your honesty and your willingness to be part of this, because you've shared your story very openly. And that's what creates change, because if people don't know, they can't make a difference. And just because we did it in the past,
and that's the hardest thing. And I don't know whether it's just in sport or in horse sport or in competition. I'm not sure. And I get it. I do get it. Everyone's like, oh, well, we want to stick to our own little lane and stay in our bubble. And that's fine too. But for what? I'm not going to the Olympics, and neither is Boulevard, so I'm not letting out any trade secrets. I'm like, it's not about that. It's about, there are so many people out there that even if they ride their horses on a weekend, they spend the same amount of money on adjustment, they spend the same amount of money on feed, they spend the same amount of time caring.
That's right.
And it's just like, well, who are you not to put it out there and go, well, it's normal.
Yeah.
It's normal not to know the answer.
That's right. Exactly.
And it's just the only thing you can't do is stop trying. And look, I was lucky, because if I'd had any other horse, I don't know, Boulevard, we always thought he's sensitive. He's a sensitive soul, big red. But he's stoic, and he waited and I'm sure he was like, she'll get it right, she'll figure it out.
I think the borders are open now. I think I can come and meet the
so it's one of those things, but I can sit here and honestly say that he just wouldn't be here. That's, you know, right. So it's nice to see now he's truly healthy. Yeah, now he has good feet. Now he has good legs. Now he has, and you go, okay, before he looked healthy, but now he acts healthy. Yeah. So it's, I'm just glad it's over.
Exciting times ahead.
And I don't have to think about it anymore, and I can get on with it.
Exactly. Kylie, we'll talk forever. We probably should finish up.
I know.
So thank you so much for sharing your story, and it'd be really nice to do an update maybe in 6 months' time when you and Boulevard have been out competing and he's doing really well, and I'd love, because what would be interesting to see whether you feel a change in some of his high level movements, because as we have inflammation in the gut, it can absolutely affect things like, you know, your canter pirouettes and things like that, because you've got, you know, that less pain means more, I guess, flexibility, all those things. Anyway, that'll get me started on a whole other topic. So I'm going to finish there. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for trusting Poseidon Equine. And, you know, we've loved being part of the journey.